We think we know their names. They roll off the tongue like half-remembered poetry. Cú Chulainn, the Hound of Ulster, a warrior of impossible strength. Lugh of the Long Arm, the master of all arts. And the Morrigan, the phantom queen of battle, her shadow falling across every battlefield. These names are giants. They loom large in our modern imagination, figures of epic fantasy and wild, untamed power. We see them as characters in a grand singular story, a story of ancient Ireland, of magic and of a lost golden age. But this vision, as bold and as brilliant as it is a mirage. It is a story built on echoes. The truth is far more complex. It's more fragmented and I think much more fascinating. The tales we read today are not direct transmissions from the past. They are not pristine relics dug carefully from the earth. Instead, they are whispers. They are stories that have been told and retold, shaped by countless tongues and filtered through 1,000 years of change. The heroic warrior we picture might not be a god at all. The fearsome goddess might be something else entirely, a force of nature given a name. What we believe to be solid myth often turns out to be sand, shifting with the winds of time and belief. To understand the real Celtic gods and heroes, we have to peel back the layers. Before we can meet the gods, we must first meet the people. Who were the Celts? The very word is a convenience, a label we apply to a vast and diverse collection of tribes. They were never a single unified empire. There was no Celtic emperor, no capital city called Celtica. Instead, they were a cultural phenomenon. A shared language family, a distinct artistic style, and a common way of life that spread like wildfire across Europe. From the shores of Anatolia in modern-day Turkey, across the heartlands of Gaul, and all the way to the windswept islands of Britain and Ireland, their influence was immense. Their world was not one of stone cities and written laws. It was a world of hill forts and roundhouses, of communities clustered together for protection and kinship. Their society was built on a warrior aristocracy, but it was held together by something more: profound oral tradition. History, law, genealogy, and religion were not written down. They were memorized. They were carried in the minds of the druids, the bards, and the storytellers. The idea of a neat, orderly pantheon of Celtic gods, like the Olympians of ancient Greece, is a modern fantasy. There was no single universally worshipped set of deities. The spiritual world of the Celts was intensely local. It was tied to the very soil under their feet. A god might be the protector of a specific river, a particular mountain, or a single tribe. While some divine figures had names that echoed across vast distances, their character and importance could change dramatically from one region to the next. The gods of the Celts were a pantheon of shadows, their forms shifting and their numbers countless. Think of it this way. The spiritual landscape was as varied as the physical one. A tribe living in the dense forests of Gaul would have a different relationship with the divine than a community living on the storm-lashed coast of Scotland. Their gods would reflect their world. Let's look at the famous names, the ones that have survived the centuries. Lugh is perhaps the most widespread. His name appears not just in Irish myth as Lughnasadh or Lugh of the Long Arm, but in place names across the Celtic world. Lyon in France was once Lugdunum, the fort of Lugh. Carlisle in northern England has a similar root. This suggests he was a figure of immense importance, a pan-Celtic deity, but was he a sun god, as many have claimed? The evidence is thin. In the stories he is a master of all skills, a carpenter, a smith, a poet, a warrior. He is the ultimate craftsman, the one who can do everything. This suggests he might have been less a god of the sun and more a god of human talent and sovereignty. Then there is the Morrigan, often depicted as a single terrifying goddess of war and death. Yet in the Irish texts the name is more complex. It often refers to a trio of sisters, Bab, Macha and Anand, who collectively are called the Morrigan. She is a shapeshifter, appearing as a crow, an eel, or a beautiful woman. She's not simply a goddess of slaughter. She is a goddess of fate, a prophetess who influences the outcome of battles but does not always fight in them. Her connection to sovereignty is also crucial. She is often the force that legitimizes a king or brings about his downfall. She represents the chaotic, untamable side of nature and destiny. And what of the Tuatha Dé Danann, the tribe of gods who are said to have ruled Ireland before the coming of mortals? Beyond the gods, there are the heroes. towering figures whose deeds define the warrior spirit of the Celts. The most famous of all is Cú Chulainn, the central character of the Ulster cycle. His story is one of superhuman rage and tragic destiny. He single-handedly defends his kingdom against an entire army possessed by a battle frenzy, the reinterpretations, that contorts his body into a monstrous form. He is the ultimate warrior, a demigod whose father is the god Lugh. But could such a figure have been based on a real person? It is highly unlikely. His story is not history, it is myth. Cú Chulainn is better understood as a cultural ideal. He represents the perfect warrior in a society that valued martial prowess above almost all else. His story would have been told to young chieftains and warriors as a model for behavior. It taught them about loyalty to their tribe, the importance of honor, and the terrible price of glory. His rage, the reinterpretations, might be a mythologized description of the berserker-like fury that elite warriors would cultivate before a battle. He is a symbol, a personification of the destructive and heroic power that every chieftain hoped to command. Then there is Fionn McCumhale, the hero of the Fenian cycle. The greatest turning point in the life of these myths was the arrival of Christianity. Before this, the stories lived only on the breath of the storyteller. But from the 6th century onwards, Irish monks began the monumental task of writing them down. They did so in monasteries, centers of learning dedicated to a new god. These men were not anthropologists, they were Christian scholars, and their faith shaped every word they wrote. They preserved the tales, but they did not preserve them unchanged. They had to make these pagan stories fit within a Christian worldview. Their primary method was a process we call euhemerism. This is the act of turning gods into mortals. The monks could not accept that the Tuatha Dé Danann were gods. So they reframed them as a race of heroic kings and queens from a distant past. They became skilled magicians and warriors from Greece or Scythia who had settled in Ireland long ago. Lugh was no longer a god, but a great king. The Morrigan was not a divine arbiter of fate, but a powerful sorceress. In this way, the monks could save the stories they loved without compromising their own theology. The gods were neatly filed away as historical ancestors. This wasn't always a gentle process. Some deities were not so easily demoted. Figures that were too powerful or too problematic to be turned into kings were sometimes recast as demons or malevolent fairies. We owe these monks an immense debt. Without them, almost all of this mythology would have been lost forever, but we must always read them with a critical eye. We are reading a translation not just from one language to another, but from one belief system to another. The truth of the original myths lies in the space between the lines. The real history of these gods and heroes is hidden in plain sight, waiting for us to look closer.